A seed is an amazing life source. As small as a grain of sand, it can grow into a beautiful flower or produce delicious food. That's nature's magic. The time to sow seeds depends on the type of seed, harvest time, and whether it is sown directly into the ground or in a pot. Germination time for seeds varies widely. It can take as little as 2 days or as long as 3 weeks. Seed packages state the average germination time, such as 3 to 6 days. It's not an exact time because conditions affect the speed of germination. Most seeds for cool weather plants, such as lettuce and onions, need at least 10 degrees Celsius, that's 50 degrees Fahrenheit, to trigger germination. Seeds for plants that love heat, such as tomatoes and basil, need warmer soil, somewhere between 18 to 30 degrees Celsius or 64 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. The warmer the soil, the faster the germination. However, temperatures greater than 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit negatively impact germination. Just to clarify, I'm talking about soil temperature, not air temperature. Even if we get a string of 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit days in spring, it won't be enough to warm the soil to that temperature. Seeds also need different lighting conditions to trigger germination. The seeds that need light are often flower seeds, such as impatiens, petunias, and geraniums. However, a few seeds that produce food also need it. Specifically, they are lettuce and savory. Most seeds germinate without light. This includes tomatoes, marigolds, and thyme. Unless the seed package states it needs light, I place my pots on a shelf until germination takes place. I check every morning to see if there's activity. Once I see the first signs of life, I move the pot to a highlight location. How deep to plant a seed is straightforward. The old saying is 3 times the thickness of the seed. That means tiny seeds like carrots and petunias don't need to be covered or covered with a fine, thin layer of soil. Typically, I sprinkle these seeds on top of the soil, then water them in. Not too much water, as the soil is already damp, but just enough water to settle the soil. You'll know what I mean when you water fresh soil and it sinks slightly. Seeds that tend to be wide and thin, such as pumpkin seeds, may cause confusion. Do you plant 3 times the thickness or 3 times the width? Personally, I go 3 times the width. That's around 3/4 of an inch to an inch deep. Pumpkin seeds are vigorous and will break through soil easily. Cucumbers are the same way. There's been many great discussions over the decades on what soil to use when sowing seeds. To keep it simple, I recommend a mixture of peat moss, perlite, and vermiculite. These are all natural products, and combined, they provide a light, airy material for seeds to germinate. Air is just as important to seeds as heat and water. Perlite is white in color. When you roll it between your finger and thumb, it feels chalky. It's a form of volcanic glass that is mined across the globe. It occurs naturally in nature. It's added to potting soil to help improve drainage and to aerate the soil. Vermiculite is also naturally occurring. It is a mineral mined in several locations, including the U.S. It's a golden color and feels spongy when squished. It helps retain moisture and minerals that are slowly released to feed roots, and it helps aerate the soil. I always use ProMix to germinate seeds and grow out transplants. This is a proven mixture of peat moss, perlite, and vermiculite. It's been my go-to soil since I worked at my first garden center in the 1990s. We planted everything in it, including houseplants. Would you believe that most plants are killed by water? Watering too much causes seed and root rot. Ideally, soil for seed germination should be moist, but not overly wet. There's a balance that may be difficult to reach, but it must be done. Using pots with drainage holes increases the chances of having ideal soil moisture. There's no formula to watering. I can't say water every 3 days. Watering depends on the type of plant, the stage of growth, the type and size of pot, soil type, humidity, and air temperature. The best method to determine if a plant needs water is to look at the surface. Does it look dry? Soil will be dark if wet. If it is a light color, press your finger gently into the soil. Does it feel cool and damp? If so, it may have enough water. The final test is to lift the pot to determine its weight. Eventually, you'll know what a pot is supposed to weigh, and that will improve your watering skill. When you first moisten the soil and put it into the pot or cell pack, lift it. Get a feel for how heavy it is. Later, when you're determining if it needs water, you'll know the approximate weight it's supposed to be. If it is the same weight or heavier, don't water. If it's only slightly lighter, water still may not be needed. If it's noticeably lighter, water. I could talk for an hour about plants and water, but I'll stop there. It's a subject onto its own. There are as many different containers to sow seeds in as there are seed types. Most are plastic. This is ideal since plastic reduces water evaporation. They can also be cleaned and used again. Ideally, pots should have drainage holes to allow excess water to flow out. As I mentioned in my previous video, I love repurposing things, and I don't throw away used pots. In fact, some of my pots and cell packs were purchased more than 20 years ago. Only when they are broken beyond repair do I toss them. I also mentioned those brown trays mushrooms are sold in. I have about a dozen, and I use them to sow seeds I will later prick out into small pots or cell packs. The trays are sturdy, but they don't have drainage holes, which means I have to be extremely careful when watering. Some gardeners don't water from above, but set pots in a tub of water for 10 minutes so they absorb what they need. I've done this occasionally with individual pots. However, this is extremely time-consuming when I have 100 plants in various size pots. Armed with all this information, one of the last things to decide is whether or not you'll sow seeds indoors to get a head start on the planting season, or plant directly in the ground when soil temperatures are warm enough. There's a wide spectrum of gardener philosophy out there. Some hate starting early and don't want seedlings kicking around for weeks. Others start only a few plants and leave the rest for sowing outdoors. Usually the plants started early are tomatoes. Dedicated gardeners sow seeds indoors 4 to 8 weeks before the last frost. You'll have to check your local area for last frost dates. Where I am in Nova Scotia, that's usually the first week of June. However, I know many who plant tomato transplants outside during the long weekend in May if spring has been warm, and they are ready to protect them with some sort of covering if frost threatens. The third type of gardener sows almost all their seeds early, starting in late February. They want to see action in their garden early in the season. They want to hang their baskets of blooming petunias on their decks by the middle of May. Through years of practice, they know how long it takes from sowing to blooming or to ideal transplant size. Things like rosemary, that takes forever, are one of the first things sown. Other things, such as marigolds, can wait until late March. Of course, speed of growth depends on the many factors I've already mentioned. That said, even dedicated early seed sowers directly plant some things, such as peas and morning glories, because not only do they grow quickly, they don't like their roots disturbed. This is a lot of information to digest, but believe me, planting seeds is easy. Once you do it successfully, you'll be able to repeat that success. If you like this video, hit the like button and share the video on social media. To keep up to date with gardening magic, subscribe and hit that notification button so you won't miss an episode. Until next time, happy gardening. It was supposed to be a fun-filled 2 weeks of hiking rugged trails and gathering information for her next book, but all plans were cut short, and she had to rush home to be by her dying mother's side. The only flight out of Summer Beaver was a small 4-seater plane that was chartered by wealthy businessmen from California. 30 minutes into the flight, disaster strikes, leaving Olive and one other survivor in the middle of a vast, unforgiving wilderness. With little food and autumn closing in, the clock is ticking. Winter is never far off in northern Ontario, and with limited supplies, they must take advantage of every opportunity to survive.